So good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us. Buenas noches, bienvenidos. Gracias por estar con nosotros. Welcome to the City of Montebello Moves community meeting for tonight. Just a little quick reminder that this meeting is being recorded. Next slide, please. So for tonight, in your meeting controls, I think most of us are probably familiar with Zoom, but just want to make sure everybody is comfortable with it. We do have Spanish interpretation tonight. So if you look at the bottom of your screen, you'll see the little globe. And if you click on that, you can select the Spanish language, and then you'll be able to hear the audio translated live during our meeting. There is an option when you do that, you'll hear the original in English, and then you'll hear the Spanish overlay, or you can choose to mute the original audio, and then you would hear it only in Spanish. So I'm going to go ahead and translate that and say it in Spanish. For if anyone's in this group here, you can switch over. So buenas noches. Para recordatorio, en los controles de la reunión, puede ver abajo de su pantalla cuando dice que haga clic y va a ver ese globo que dice interpretación. Tenemos hoy en español. Puede hacer clic en el idioma que gustaría escuchar. Sería la opción para usted si quiere solamente oír en español. Puede marcar donde dice mute para ponerlo mudo o silencio al audio original. Y ahorita si quiere, si está interesado en escuchar la reunión hoy en español, lo puede hacer ahora en este momento y ya va a ser disponible inmediatamente. Okay, next slide. Okay, how to participate. So again, in the bottom of your screen, you'll see the different controls. So we will be going through the presentation. At the end of the session, at the end of the presentation, we will have a Q&A session. And at that time, you can raise your hand, and then we'll be also calling on people virtually with the raised hand. And if you're joining by phone, you would press *9 to raise your hand, and then press *6 to unmute once we call on your phone number. You can also use the Q&A feature. By using that, you can, we'll take a note of the comments or questions, and then at the end of the presentation, when we go through the Q&A, I'll go ahead and call on you at that time. Next slide. So I will go ahead at this time, we'll do our project team introductions, and I'll hand it over to our city's Director of Transportation, Lupita Ibarra.
Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you, Melissa. So as you mentioned, my name is Lupita Ibarra, and I'm the Director of Transportation for Montebello Bus Lines. I'm very excited to bring this project to you. The goal really is to connect our community and our riders to more destinations and expand the coverage for Montebello. This is a perfect opportunity to hear from you, and we really do have the opportunity to mold and shape how we grow our service and where we grow our service. So I'm really looking forward to hearing feedback from this group. And also, that said, I'll be passing on the baton to the project manager.
Hi, good afternoon. My name is James Gomez. I'm the project manager for Montebello Moves. I am with a transportation consulting firm called Nelson Nygaard, and I'm joined by my colleague, Peter Soderberg.
Hi, good evening. My name is Peter Soderberg. I'm Deputy Project Manager for Montebello Moves. I also work for the transportation planning firm Nelson Nygaard. I'm a senior associate there based out of our Seattle office. And next, I'll turn it over to Julie.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Julie Nieto. I am the outreach lead on this project, working with Ariano Associates, and I'll hand it over to Melissa.
Great, thank you, everyone. Melissa Olguin, the outreach manager, working together with Julie and the team. So from here, I'll go ahead and hand it over now to James to walk us through the agenda and the presentation.
All right, so a brief overview of what we're going to be discussing this evening. First, we're going to provide an overview of the project, give you show you where we're at in the timeline, as well as discuss some of the goals of the project. Next, we're going to highlight some of the key findings from our existing conditions analysis. followed by an overview of the proposed changes for all the MBL routes. At the end, we're going to reserve some time for question and answer with the group. So we look forward to hearing from you all today. All right, so the Montebello Moves study began back in July of last summer. And the first phase of the project was an analysis of the existing service as well as the demand for transit within the area that's currently served by MBL. That first phase of the project was approximately 4 months and resulted in a report that summarized all of those different findings. Following that first phase of the project, we conducted some early community outreach, which included community surveys, some pop-up outreach at different locations. We also had an onboard survey in which we heard from many different riders about their perspective of the service today, how it operates, what are some of the strengths and weaknesses and opportunities. And we also met with different stakeholders as well as regional partners. The second phase of the project was in which we took all of the findings from that early step of the project, and we also took it to community outreach, and we started to develop different service scenarios or ideas, different ways that MBL could potentially change their service in the future, both short-term as well as long-term, to help better meet some of the needs of its existing as well as potential riders. Right now, we are in the middle of our second round of community outreach, and we are going out to different locations, talking to riders as well as other members of the community, meeting riders where they're at on the bus, at bus stops, different locations. And we also have a pretty in-depth online outreach that we're going to talk about later during this meeting. We're hoping to share with the community all of these different concepts for the future of Montebello Bus Lines and get your thoughts on what you like and ways that we can also improve that. Once we gather all that feedback over the next several months, we're going to be refining those different concepts and turning them into recommendations. That'll ultimately lead into a strategic plan that'll detail both the short-term as well as the longer-term improvements that MBL can make to better serve its community. Some of the key project goals that were established very early on is first just trying to understand what are the priorities for existing riders. What are some of the things that they value in their everyday transit experience? Also, we wanted to understand for them, what are some of the things about the existing service that they feel like can be improved? We want to ultimately make transit more convenient, more useful, more viable for the community. So understanding from existing riders what works and what doesn't is very important. We also want to try and create a more equitable and sustainable transit system, one that's sustainable into the future, that has growth, but has responsible growth. We also want to look at ways that we can tap into some of the high capacity investments that are going in across the region that are planned in and around the city of Montebello, but also connect to some of the transit, high capacity transit that's already in the region. So those are things that we're looking to accomplish, both short-term as well as longer term. Mentioned earlier that our end product will be a service plan that's going to detail all of the different improvements, but it's also going to include different capital investments that are recommended and ways that MBL can partner with other agencies as well as municipal operators to better improve transit system for the entire region. Next, I'm going to hand it over to Peter, and he is going to detail some of the key findings from our existing conditions analysis.
Thanks. So like James mentioned earlier, one of the first tasks as a part of this project is conducting a really comprehensive analysis of the existing conditions for the network. And this really lets us get a better idea of what's working well, what are the strengths of the system, maybe what's not working well, and where there's opportunities for improvement through these service changes. And one of the first things we identified about the Montebello Bus Lines system is that it has a really large, extensive route network. This map on the right shows all of the routes in the Montebello Bus Lines system. And you can see through that dashed line, which represents the city of Montebello's boundaries, that most of these routes extend quite a ways outside of the city limits, including all the way to downtown Los Angeles to the west, as far east as Whittier and La Mirada, as far south as Bell Gardens and Southgate, and as far north as Alhambra and San Gabriel. So really seeing how far outside of the city limits these routes really go brings both opportunities and challenges. Next slide. So it's important to realize that Montebello Bus Lines doesn't operate in a vacuum. There are other agencies that operate routes both in the same area as well as nearby. So keeping in mind some of these smaller municipal agencies that operate their own circulator routes and serve their own communities, as well as some of the larger regional services provided by LA Metro in terms of both their bus routes as well as their light rail lines. And identifying ways that we can both provide supplemental service and it's complementary so that service really works together instead of competing with other services and trying to provide service in the same areas. Finding those opportunities to really work together with the other agencies and provide service that works best for the whole community. Next slide, please. One of the first things we looked at as a part of this analysis as well is stop level ridership for each stop on every route in the system. And we immediately identified a couple of strong core high ridership routes, particularly line 10 operating along Whittier Boulevard and line 40 operating along Beverly Boulevard. We also identified a few areas where ridership is a little bit lower than other areas, particularly along line 50. There's some of the more industrial areas along Washington Boulevard, as well as the extension south of Whittier along La Mirada. So what we can do with this information is identify the ways that we can build upon these strong high ridership routes and identify some opportunities for improving some of the lower ridership areas along the system. Next slide. We also took a look at the service span and frequency for every route in the system for both weekdays and on weekends. And something that we found is that some of those higher ridership routes, like again, lines 10 and 40, operate with higher frequency service, as much as every 15 minutes during all day for line 10 and during the peak period for line 40. And those routes also operate later in the evening than some other routes, as late as 9:30 or so. But some routes like lines 30, 50, 60, and 70 don't operate as late into the evening or don't operate with as much frequency as the other routes. So really identifying some of these opportunities to extend service later into the evening or provide more consistent weekend service to make sure that we're meeting the needs of the community and providing more consistent, useful service. Next slide, please. We also looked at how ridership patterns have evolved over time. Starting before the pandemic, we saw that ridership was about 400,000 or so boardings per month. And once the pandemic hit in March 2020, service was reduced and suspended, ridership dropped accordingly. And starting around the summer of 2020, when service began coming back online and ridership returned to the system, started back at around 150 to 200,000 boardings per month. Something else that we saw is that as it continues to grow throughout the summer of 2021, we noticed that weekend ridership dropped about 40% from pre-pandemic, whereas weekday ridership decreased by about 60% initially. So what this tells us is that ridership patterns and travel patterns in general may be evolving following the pandemic, and that providing things like weekend service or more midday service may be becoming more important than typical weekday commuter-oriented service around typical 9 to 5 workday. Next slide, please. Another early finding from the existing conditions evaluation was that some routes lack strong destinations at their endpoints. The example on the right here shows line 30 that comes up to Huntington Drive and really just kind of turns around and goes back the way it came. There's not really a strong employment hub or destination at that area. So using these as opportunities to find stronger destinations that can generate more ridership in both directions of the route, looking for things like large employment hubs, large residential developments, or things like large regional transit connections like other metro rail line stations or things of that nature emerges another opportunity that we can look at as a part of our service changes. Next slide, please. And finally, we identified some of the key destinations within the area, some of which are currently served by MBL and some of which are just outside the service area. So some places like downtown Los Angeles, East LA College, downtown Montebello, Monterey Park, the shops at Montebello, Uptown Whittier are all strong destinations that are currently served by the system, but a few others like Cal State LA and Rio Hondo College are just outside of the existing service area and represent potential opportunities for extending service to those areas. Next slide. So next I'll hand it back over to James to review some of our findings for the existing system.
Okay, so we'll go down the list and note some of the opportunities that each line has. Also just some of the trends, some of which Peter's already highlighted. So So beginning with line 10, ridership does drop once you go east of Uptown Whittier, and that's the easternmost segment of line 10, which is shown in blue. Line 20 has a northern terminus that also does not have a strong anchor, and that's located at the intersection of Las Tunas and San Gabriel Boulevard. Line 30, on the other hand, doesn't have a strong anchor at its southern terminus. It also does not run very frequently throughout the day. Line 40 is one of the top two routes along with Route 10. It has a eastern terminal point that also is not at a major destination. And on its western end, when it goes through downtown LA, it tends to get stuck in some of the congestion there. So it takes a good amount of time to get through downtown and then get back out traveling east again. Line 50 is a very long route compared to the other lines in the system. It runs from downtown LA all the way through sections of Commerce, the southern part of Montebello through Pico Rivera, Whittier, and then all the way out down to La Mirada. And this is a line that, because it's so long, it's hard to maintain the schedule. It doesn't provide as much flexibility in adjusting that schedule because it serves so many different land uses, and the ridership varies throughout this very extensive line. Lines 60 and 70 are the two local routes in the system. When I say local routes, I mean routes that are traditional. They make stops every couple of blocks. But lines 60 and 70 are the two lines that have much lower ridership than the others. They do not have any weekend service. Line 60 operates sort of on its own along Pico Rivera, Parsons Boulevard. Because it's so short, it doesn't really hit too many destinations other than some of the schools in the area. And line 70, similarly, is a fairly short route that runs from the Metrolink Commerce Station, and it travels north through the city of Montebello and terminates at the shops at Montebello. Line 90 is unique in that it's the only route in the system that is not a typical local route. Instead, it's an express route, so it only runs during morning and afternoon peak periods. Line 90 originates in the city of Montebello, and it travels to downtown LA, and it makes some stops along Whittier or Beverly Boulevard along the way. Next slide, please. So the proposed changes that we're going to be sharing now are focused just on the short term. We're taking the existing resources, that being the existing number of buses and bus operators, and trying to do different things with those resources to better serve existing and potential riders. Peter earlier mentioned some of the potential destinations. Some of those will be included over the next couple of slides, and some of them are more longer term and would require additional resources. But as we talk about just what to do with the existing amount of service, we'll go area by area and talk about some of the specific line changes that could potentially happen and how they might benefit, as well as negatively impact some of the riders. Just mention that lines 60 and 70 are unique in that they don't have Sunday service. They're relatively short, and they just focus on more the central part of the MBL service area. The map on the left shows the existing lines, and then the map on the right shows how they could be modified. And we're proposing to combine lines 60 and 70 so that they meet at the shops at Montebello. This would provide better connectivity from Pico Rivera, which Parsons Boulevard primarily serves residential areas, from Pico Rivera to the shops at Montebello and other destinations within the city of Montebello. This would allow both routes an opportunity to see increased ridership and connect people with more places. Line 50, as we mentioned earlier, is the longest route in the system and covers a lot of ground. We are proposing to split this route basically in half in the southern part of Montebello and have it overlap for a short segment. The western portion of the route would still run from downtown LA to Montebello, but it would terminate just south of Washington Boulevard in the Greenwood Avenue area. The eastern portion of the route would be renamed Line 55 and would run from the Metrolink Commerce Station in Montebello out east and continue on to Whittier Town Center, which is currently served by line 10. Line 90, which is the one express route in the system, would be realigned from Beverly Boulevard and get to Highway 60 in a quicker manner. This would reduce the travel time on the route and make it a more attractive option for commuters into downtown LA because it would get them there faster. Next slide, please. Now moving on from the Montebello and Pico Rivera areas to West San Gabriel Valley. So this is really the northern section of the MBL service area. There are a couple of modifications. First, note that line 20, which serves San Gabriel Boulevard, we are not proposing any changes to that specific route. Line 30, on the other hand, this was the line that Peter showed had a turnaround along Huntington with not a real strong endpoint. We are proposing to extend this route to the northwest, a couple of miles to the South Pasadena Gold Line station. The line would stop just short of that station, get people within walking distance, and provide better regional connectivity. We have heard from some riders that they'd like to have better access to the Gold Line station, and this would provide just that. Also, line 10, which operates on Whittier and is the highest ridership route in the system, we are proposing to extend this route from East LA College northward to Cal State LA. And while there are other transit options to get from Montebello and East LA to Cal State LA, this would provide residents of Montebello and other areas served by line 10, such as Whittier, with a one-seat ride to Cal State LA. So we're focusing on improving the access to education, and we think that this would also attract new riders. Next slide, please. Now moving a bit west to downtown LA, which is currently served by 3 lines, line 90, which is the express route, then lines 40 and 50. We are not proposing any changes to line 90 going in and out of downtown. Line 40, also we are proposing that continues to serve travel through downtown. However, line 50 is one that could be shortened to the LA Trade and Tech College, which is just on the south edge of downtown, where there's Expo and Blue Line stations in the vicinity of Washington Boulevard. We think by shortening this route, we would still give people good access to downtown, but we would reduce the travel time on this route by 20 minutes. So that time could be reinvested into the route to allow it to run at a more frequent interval. So instead of say every 45 minutes, it could run every 40 minutes or so. So this is one improvement that while it would not provide as direct access into downtown, many other riders along this route would be able to have more frequent service. Next slide, please. And the fourth and last of the areas that we have been breaking the service area down into is the Whittier and La Mirada areas. So this is on the southeastern portion of the service area. Line 10, as we mentioned earlier, is one of the top 2 routes in the system. And ridership along that route drops off once you get east of Uptown Whittier. So we are proposing to shorten the route to that location, to Uptown Whittier. As we covered on one of the previous slides, line 10 would also be extended to Cal State LA. So essentially what we're doing is we're shifting the route to the northwest just a bit. It would still run at the same frequency, so it would still be a very frequent route. We're just shifting the resources from one area to the other. The segment of Whittier Boulevard between Uptown Whittier and Whittier Town Center, which is an important regional transfer point, would then now be served by the new Route 55. Route 55, another reason why we're proposing to split Route 50 into 2 is that we think that Route 55, or the segment on the eastern half of line 50 today, warrants a higher level of service. So by breaking the route, we're able to provide more reliable service, a schedule that's just more on time, but also customize the 2 routes so that we can put the appropriate level of service on each one of the 2. So the proposed line 50 could run later, it could run more frequent than the current line 50, which would be on the west half of that route. Note on this map on the right that there's a dashed line that's along La Mirada Boulevard as well as Mulberry Drive. And these segments of the current line 50 are proposed to be discontinued. There are other transit services within this area, including Norwalk Transit routes 4 and 5, as well as the Sunshine Shuttles routes A and B. We are actively talking with some of the other regional partners about this impact and what it could potentially mean to transit users as well as the other systems in the vicinity. All right, next slide, please. All right, so now I'll hand it back over to Melissa to talk about some of our community outreach, unless there are any questions that Melissa you'd like to address from the chat.
I think we can go through these slides and then take all the questions at the Q&A part. Okay, great. Thank you, James. So on the community outreach side, it was really important to the city and to the project team to make sure that we really did extensive outreach, especially right now as we have been transitioning back into in-person. So we did give this a lot of thought and tried to get creative and make sure that we had some diverse efforts that were done throughout the city. And so as you can see here on the slide, we have a variety of different tactics that were implemented. We did the bus stop signage. So we actually went to select stops and distributed nearly 200 flyers to post out at various locations. We also did targeted flyer drop-offs. So we had hard copy printouts to specific locations that they could have distribution counters. For example, the YMCA, the Beverly Hospital, some libraries. And then as well as using those flyers for all of the bus routes, they were placed on board the buses so that all the riders could get the information as well. And then also the bus rider outreach, we looked at specific lines that represented the highest ridership, and also wanting to make sure that there were the lines that were going to have significant changes, some of the things that you just heard from James. Our goal is really to try to make sure that there are no surprises down the road when some of these changes are implemented. So we did some concerted effort to make sure we were able to reach those riders. And next, and then the presentations as well. We were able to do some pop-up events as they were able to starting to come online. So we did do some outreach specifically there. You can see the pictures at the East LA College and the shops at Montebello. And then in addition, we did some presentations. So we had a group briefing discussion with some of the stakeholders from the community, and then as well as a discussion directly with the bus operators to get their perspective as well. And we know that they're firsthand with the riders and were able to give us some feedback from their perspective. Next slide, please. And then in terms of additional outreach focused more on the digital side, there was a website that is still currently active. So it's the mblmoves.com that's specific for this project. And then there's also the Ride MBL website that links to the project website. So there was a variety of ways to reach the website information. And a survey that is still active now is still available to collect feedback on the proposed changes. And that's going to be available through April 1st. We realize that, in the evening, sometimes not everyone's able to participate. So we do encourage you to please share this information, share the link with your friends, your family, your neighbors. We want to definitely get as much input as possible. And that, again, is available still for another 2 weeks for people to participate. We also had some social media ads, and we pushed out the information as well through the city's social media channels as well as the MBL channels. We created a toolkit. So one of the things, it's sometimes hard to kind of push out information. So we wanted to make sure to create something that was easy to grab and share with your networks and the different stakeholders that we met with as well. Through that group discussion, we asked them to push out the information to their networks. So the toolkit containing different assets and graphics and quick links that they could just post onto their own websites, post onto their own social media channels, and blast out to their contacts. And we have been doing regular e-blasts. Hopefully you guys all here in this group receive those, as well as through the newsletter to push out this information about both the survey and tonight's community meeting. So with that, we'll go ahead and go over to the next slide. So that does conclude the presentation part of our meeting tonight. And so what we want to do now, now that we've shared this information with you, the purpose of the meeting tonight is to get input from our stakeholders, our residents, the writers. And so that's what we're going to jump into now. So just as a reminder, if you just joined us, this is a Zoom meeting where you raise your virtual hand if you have any questions. I do see some already raised. And then I'll go through and call those and answer one by one, and the project team will be available to respond to your questions and or comments. If you're on the line, the phone line, you can also participate in this session by pressing *9 to raise your hand. And then I'll call out the last 4 numbers of your phone number, and then you can press *6 when I call those out to unmute. Okay, so let's go ahead and get started here. So I'm going to just go through the order I see here on the screen, and I'm going to be monitoring the raised hands as well as the chat. So just bear with me, and I'll kind of bounce back between the two to make sure that we get everyone's questions addressed. So I see here on Diane Montes, if you want to go ahead and unmute and ask your question, please.
Hello.
Hi, Diane.
Hi. So about the 10 bus, I see that you guys are in the process of trying to make it not to go to just to Uptown Whittier.
Yes, that's correct, Diana. Thank you.
Oh, so what bus will take you back up Whittier Boulevard after it turns? So it'll probably end on Philadelphia, right?
Do you want to go back to that slide, Sam?
Please.
Because
I take the bus all the way to work, and then I go to college. So I seen it and I was like, oh, let me check, because I don't drive or anything. So I thought it was pretty good that it went to Cal State LA, but then it leaves me that because I work all the way at Norm's Famous Burger on Ocean View in Whittier.
Yeah, let's take a look at slide 20 again, Sam, if you can pull that back up on the screen. And then if you want to ask a question.
Okay, so
I'm going to ask you to mute while he responds, just so you can hear him clearly. Thank you. So you had some background noise. Okay, James, go ahead, please.
So Diane, thanks for your question and feedback. So the proposal is that line 10 would continue to serve Uptown Whittier. It would go past Philadelphia or south of Philadelphia Street, most likely to the vicinity of Mar Vista and Painter Ave. So that wouldn't quite make it to Norm's, which is out on Whittier east of there. But however, that where you work at that location would be served by the proposed line 55.
Okay, great. Thank you, James.
Where, okay. I'm coming from Whittier Boulevard and Pico Rivera. So if I take it, the 10 to Mar Vista, where would I catch the 55? Would I have to take 3 buses? Will I have to take the 7 to the 55 and then that?
You could take the 55 all the way to Pico Rivera, and where are you near?
I'm on Whittier
Rosemead?
Boulevard. I'm on Whittier and Passons.
Passons. Okay, so the path to get there would be to take the line 70 to line 55 under this scenario.
Where is the 70 at?
So the 70 runs along Passons. The other option is if you could also just take line 10 to Uptown Whittier and then just transfer there by the courthouse to the proposed line 55. And I should also just note that these are only proposals at this point. Nothing has been finalized. But the more frequent option, the option that would probably be the fastest would be to continue to take line 10 as you do today, but to transfer there by the courthouse.
To the 55. It'll take me all the way down to Ocean View?
Correct. Correct.
Oh, okay. So it's just another bus. Oh, but it's just maybe. Can I vote no?
You can vote no. Absolutely. That's what
I mean, it just there's a lot of people that take it. There's a lot of like customers I see there. There's a lot of people that I know from Norms that, you know, they take the bus and they eat there and then they do what they gotta do. And I mean, it's just a little bit more. I mean, but I don't. I was doing really good because it took me to college, it took me home, and then it took me to work.
So Diane, it sounds like the eastern part of it, changing or shortening the line 10 would not work for you as far as going there. But did you say what was your feedback on the extension to USULA?
It was good. I thought it was good because I thought it was gonna go from Whitwood Mall all the way to Cal State. So I see that they're trying to take it from the rest of the Whitwood Mall on and do it to the school, continue to the school.
Right. And Diane, you may notice that once you get east of Uptown Whittier or south of Uptown Whittier, ridership starts to drop off. And that was the rationale behind this proposal to reduce or change the level of service that's along the section of Whittier that's south of Uptown Whittier. But thank you so much for your comment and feedback. We appreciate that.
Yes, thank you, Diane. Thank you for your time and being here tonight. Okay, we're going to go to the next person. I have M. Carrillo with your hand raised. If you can go ahead and unmute and ask your question, please.
Great. I would like to know if the Montebello district and the El Rancho district know that you're cutting off the service that takes the students to the high school. Do they know? Are they aware of these changes?
James,
Can you hear me?
I can hear
yes,
you.
we can hear you. Thank you.
So thank you so much for your question. So Montebello School District is one of our stakeholders. The specific change to line 70, Sure High School would still be served by line 70. We would not move away from Sure High School, so it would still
Okay,
be
so it's still gonna, so the route is not gonna change?
No, the route would only be extended. So the
It's gonna
route,
be
route 70 that
extended?
currently serves Montebello would be combined with the 60, the Pico Rivera route on Parsons Boulevard.
So it's still gonna take the Pico Rivera kids to their high school as well?
Exactly,
All
right.
right.
Correct.
And because at this time it runs about an hour and a half. Are you going to improve the service? Or is it still gonna, you're gonna extend it and it's still gonna run once every hour or every 2 hours?
And we can go to slide 17, Sam, so we can
Because
talk.
I see the changes, but I don't see what time, how often these lines are gonna run.
Yeah, that's a great question regarding the schedule. So I can answer both of those. So in regards to the alignment, just to be completely clear, the line that's shown in purple on the right, the map on the right, line 70, that's a combination of the current 70 plus the current 60. Still serving all of the schools in Pico Rivera that are currently served, as well as the schools in Montebello, which you mentioned, as far in addition to Sure High School, there are for Wilcox. So those schools continue to be served. Another thing that we notice about these two routes, aside from that they don't run very late, they don't run on weekends, is they're not very frequent. By tying them together, we think this will increase ridership and will also warrant the increase in service levels. So more frequency. Every 50 to 60 minutes as they're at today is not great. We'd like to get them more frequent than that, back to a level that they used to be. But in order to get there, there needs to be the ridership. So this changes to first make them give both lines an opportunity to see more ridership, to succeed, and to over time increase the service levels. We mentioned earlier that weekend ridership is one that hasn't seen as big of a drop off as much as weekday has. So that's another improvement that we'd like to make to the 60 and 70, is to add weekend service.
Yeah, but I mean, the drop off in numbers and ridership is because COVID. A lot of kids are staying home still, right? And because the other day I noticed the kids missed the bus here, the 70, that was going to take them to Montebello High. And that's it. They were gonna have to wait an hour and a half to get to school. And I think these cuts were not appropriate in the morning when kids need to get to school. Especially, I mean, that's like ridiculous. And that's what I see in the south side, that all these cuts here on the south side of Montebello, all these buses run every hour, basically.
Yeah.
So, could I ask clarification, or just maybe an additional point to that? are you saying that they would be more supportive? Because right now, if it's going all day or it's only the hour and a half, then
Yeah, I
would it
understand,
be,
that the 70, because it services the high school. And I know that it was set up to service the high schools. That's the only reason why the 70 has been in function, because of the high school, to
so
service
that
the
the
kids.
service should be focused more on those peak times when the kids are going to
Yes,
school?
in the morning when they
Yeah.
go to school,
Mhm.
because previously, before COVID, it was about every 40 minutes, but previously it was every 30 minutes. And then in the evenings, because especially in the high school, they play sports, they get out at 6:37, they don't have transportation to come home. So low-income students basically are not allowed to participate in after school activities because they don't have the means of transportation, some of them, right? To participate in football, band, wrestling.
So actually then if, because the kids get out of school at what time? 2:30?
Sure, high school, they get out about 3
3?
o'clock, 2:55, something like that.
So it's the after school at 3-ish, and then you
Yeah.
mentioned school
And then
sports. What time would that be then?
if they have sports, I know my son, when he was playing sports, he would leave at 6:30. So yeah, I think that in between, if it runs every hour, hour and a half, I can see why, because there's no ridership. But in the peak hours, the morning, and at 3 to 6:30, it should continue to run like previously, because that's the thing. Like the 50 used to run every half hour, now it's every hour and a half. And that's the thing about the service, that it's very unreliable. When there's a bus driver out sick, we're out there 2 hours waiting for a bus. So you can see why people, instead of gravitating towards the bus line and relying it as trustable or dependable transportation, we can't. We know we cannot depend on the 50 to show up. Every day I have to call, hey, is the 50 going to show up today? I was out one time, I think 2 Saturdays ago. The last bus that runs going westbound on the 50 line is supposed to be the last one that passes through Rosemead at 8:39. It never showed up. And that's the last bus. And I understand that people call out sick, but you cannot do that to the public. Have the last bus on the line not show up. I could see in between, it makes more sense, even though you're going to make the people wait 2 hours, but I don't get it. The service is very unreliable. For the 50, the new line 50, where would I catch it? Where is it going to begin? At the Metrolink?
James, go ahead. You want to go ahead?
The line 50, so you're referring to going west of Montebello or going east? Because
going west.
Okay,
The new line 50.
going west, the library just south of Washington Boulevard.
Yeah.
The Chet, that's
Chet Hollyfield,
yeah, at the Recreation Center Library. That would be Chet Hollyfield Library is where that route, in that vicinity, is where it would turn around. We haven't identified the exact location, but it would be very close to the library.
It's right there.
Mhm.
Okay.
Right.
Alrighty.
Then the eastern half of the 55 would end at the Metrolink station under this scenario. And you brought up really.
Oh, when we're coming east, it's going to leave us at the Metrolink.
It would also pass by Greenwood and Washington.
Oh, okay.
He stops there. They would crisscross.
Yeah.
That would be the endpoint for that route. And that provides connections with the 70. And
Yeah.
also just a good layover location with restroom facilities. But you brought up a couple good points there. One is reliability,
Yeah.
and the other one is just operators, and those really work hand in hand. There's the scheduled, the schedule that MBL strives to adhere to that and make every single run and make it on time. Operator shortages has been a major issue, not just for MBL, but for all the systems.
Yeah.
I know that the new director, Lupita Ibarra, is on the phone. That's one of the biggest initiatives moving forward is trying to ensure that that's not a problem in the future.
Yeah, and that's another thing. I know when I get on, they always tell me that they want to quit. They're not happy. I don't know why, but anyway. All righty, sounds good. So are you gonna improve the time for the 50, or is it gonna stay the same every hour or every half hour? I mean, every hour and a half?
So ideally, every route would run more frequently than it does today and go back to the levels that they once were, but we have to prioritize those. And the 55 would likely be prioritized over the 50.
Mhm.
And the 70 and the 60, those we would probably focus more so on those peak times, like you mentioned, when students are using it. We heard from operators yesterday that that bus used to be standing room only on the 60 on the
Oh,
passenger
yeah,
part.
and the 70.
Right, during school
Yeah.
times. So those would be prioritized during those times. And then over time, there would be more service during the midday periods.
Mhm. All righty, thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Correa. Appreciate your comment and really good feedback. We're taking notes.
Thank you.
Okay, so we will go ahead and move on. Luis Samaniego, you can go ahead and unmute and ask your question.
Hi there. I've been an express rider for almost 22 years now. So that's the line I'm mostly concerned about. But in your readership survey or ridership surveys, I mean, I only recently went back to work because I was working from home for like nearly 2 years. So I don't know how many people you've heard from that take the 90. I know a lot of people, but I don't know what you guys have heard from. And that you say the 90 starts at Taylor Ranch, but we used to have a deal with Whittier where we had one bus that came from Norwalk Boulevard, and I think the system got money from Whittier to provide that service. So we used to have a bus that went out that far. And also the express doesn't always take the freeway. I went back to work recently and the driver immediately told us the freeway is horrible and we're gonna take side streets all the way. So I'm not exactly sure how you're gonna get from Taylor Ranch going on Lincoln and making any stops and then going on the freeway, because a lot of people are like catching the bus. Like they'll like race the bus and try to get it at Atlantic, which is kind of the last chance before the bus hits the freeway. So I don't know how many people you've heard from, but I could see that being a problem because now I walk to Starbucks and I catch it there. But now I think you're telling me I have to walk to Taylor Ranch and it's immediately going to go west. So what are the stops that you have planned for the 90 in Montebello?
So that's a great question. So I'll start by just saying that the 90 as it exists today, the ridership's pretty low. It's one that it's going to take some time for it to bounce back as people start to return to work downtown, and we're seeing that happen already. The path from Taylor Ranch onto the 60 today, going on Beverly, it does allow for more interim stops, but it also makes the route more of a local for that section or limited stop route. In an effort to speed up the service and try to make it more attractive, it would take Lincoln Ave and then go by Schur High School. And then it would get on at Garfield Ave using those entrances and exits onto the 60. So it's trying to really prioritize the speed of the service. The stops have not all been identified because there would be some new stops that would need to be built along Lincoln Ave. But it would also use some of the existing stops there near Schur High School.
The problem being is that the stops now where the riders actually petitioned and got like parking at City Hall, because not everybody walks to the bus. I mean, a lot of people drive to the bus. And so the area you're talking about, there's no parking in any of those places. So I don't know how people are going to be able to go park somewhere and then get on the bus. I mean, Lincoln's residential, Schur High School is, curvy and there's not even any parking on that street. And that's just like something I'm pointing out. So I'm just curious about where people are going to be able to access the bus. I think you're trying to like increase ridership, but I think that's going to decrease it. I mean, I don't know. And then I was going to ask you also about when I first started taking the bus, there were actually in-system transfers where you could go from one line to another and you could just get a transfer. But then the bus line would only give you a transfer if you went to another agency. If you went from Montebello to Montebello line, you had to pay. So, I mean, I think that's a feature that makes it less attractive. And also the last thing I'd like to say is that when I tried to take the survey, I got a notice that it was closed online. So I wasn't able to do that. But I think that's all I have. It's just, I've recently come back to work like in the last 2 weeks. So I'm kind of new to all this. But I know I have a huge network of people's email addresses that also have taken the Express over the years.
Thank you, Louise. Yeah, I think definitely you're similar to most of us, just starting to return to get back to our in-person routine. So that'll definitely be a transition. We'll double check on the survey. It is still open for sure, as I mentioned earlier. Right now we're targeting April 1st. So please, will give us a day and we'll just go check that tomorrow. And then please make sure to share that to the contacts that you said that you know, right, that express line. Okay, and we do have some comments in the Q&A, so I'll go ahead and read them out. We have 2 comments. First one being, Sunshine Shuttle and Norwalk Transit is not a good alternative in La Mirada. Maybe work with the Sunshine Shuttle to cover La Mirada Boulevard. Or I'd prefer to cancel Sunshine Shuttle and use that money to keep line 50 in service. So James, do you want to address that, please?
Yes, that's a good comment. Thank you for that. And we have heard that from some folks that the drop off from MBL line 50 to some of the alternatives are not necessarily a good one. And we are going to have conversations, additional conversations with some of the partners, the regional partners, to see what are the options about others perhaps working to fill some of the gaps. We have had conversations with the city of Norwalk in the past, and we'll continue to have conversations and look at Sunshine Shuttle as another alternative, and could potentially modifications be made to fill some of the gaps in that area.
Great, thank you, James. And our next comment is, there was a discussion on extending lines to employment hubs instead of ending at a random intersection. I'd like to see line 20 extended to Westfield Santa Anita Mall. It's a major employment hub and destination, but doesn't have a good transit option from San Gabriel Boulevard. Currently, multiple transfers are required on infrequent buses.
Happy to answer that one. So extending line 20, San Gabriel Boulevard, we did look at a couple of options for that. One of them was San Gabriel Valley Medical Center, which is only a short distance away on Las Tunas Drive. Couldn't find really a good place to turn around at that location. Also, it would require just more resources, which aren't available at the moment. So you mentioned Westfield Santa Anita Mall, which is about almost 5 miles away to the northeast. That's a little bit outside of the range of Montebello Bus Lines area, and would also duplicate some LA Metro services, some major LA Metro lines that run on other big arterial streets. So if it were to be extended, it would likely be within a closer proximity to where it currently terminates. And we are still looking at other options for extending that route to a major destination. The current terminal point isn't really a major point, but thank you for that comment.
Thank you, James. We have one more in the Q&A, and then I'll go back to the virtual hands. So the question is the proposed line 70 moving away from Rosemead Boulevard?
Happy to answer that one as well. No, in fact, it would continue to serve Rosemead Boulevard over by the dam. There is a small section of Rosemead that would be eliminated. That's between Beverly and Whittier, and that may be actually the segment that you're referring to. Line 70 would shift over to Durfee, which it currently does operate on for a short segment. But in order to just keep the route as direct as possible, the segment between Whittier and Beverly Boulevards would be Durfee, which is about a little less than a quarter mile, or almost exactly a quarter mile from Rosemead.
Great, thank you, James. And I do see we have another hand raised, so we'll go back to the virtual hands. Bill Lamb, if you want to go ahead and unmute and ask your question, please. And I don't see any more questions on the Q&A, so if you do, please go ahead and put those in there. Go ahead, Bill.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Go ahead.
Hello?
Yes, please go
Okay,
ahead.
well, I have a lot of comments and concerns for every bus line. So I wouldn't waste your time though. But yeah. So for line 10, I strongly support going into Cafe Alavia, Flora, and Eastern. But however, on the Eastern side, I don't think I think you should keep the existing route to the Woodwood town center, because people like don't want to like transfer buses or like keep like paying for another fare instead. But so I think a one seat ride between Cal State LA and Woodwood Town Law is better than transferring to another bus line from Whittier to that. And for line 20, prior to the pandemic, weekend service like ends at Garvey Avenue, and there's like nothing between Las Tunas and Garvey. So, when pandemic ends, consider like making line 20 and at Las Tunas like every day, either all trips or some selected trips. And for line 30, I'm okay going into South Pasadena, but the but the lining between Garfield, Huntington, and Fair Oaks and Mission, why can't you like consider running on Garfield and Mission just to like work between Huntington and Fair Oaks, just to like replace the summer Metro line 176 that was canceled under the next gen. But if this alignment isn't good enough, then consider keeping the Fair Oaks and Huntington between Mission and Garfield. And for 50 and 55, I don't know if I'm not sure if
Sorry,
it's a
Bill,
good-
can I interrupt you for a second? I know you talked about 3 lines, so maybe we can pause for a second and let
Sure.
James respond, and then you can continue with the other lines. Is that okay?
Okay. Yeah. Sorry about that.
That's okay. And I hope there's a little bit of background noise. So James, I think that you probably caught most of it, but it was line 10, line 20, and line 30.
Right, so it sounds like line 20 was just kind of support the extension to East LA College, but not necessarily the shortening of the route. Line 20 is what you talked about, Las Tunas, but line 30 is one I want to focus on. I think you said consider Garfield Ave instead of Fair Oaks between Huntington. Is that correct?
Actually, it's Garfield and Mission between Huntington and Fair Oaks.
Yeah, that's a fairly more residential section that probably would not be ideal for the buses. I think that's the reason why there's not service there at the moment. But Huntington and Fair Oaks are just better transit corridors. They're wider roads, have existing bus stops, and they're more appropriate for a larger vehicle.
Okay, I see. So wait, is that all for the 3 lines before I can continue, or?
Yeah, please continue.
Okay. So for the 50 and 55, I'm not pretty sure about splitting it up, but the main issue is about serving the La Mirada residents, because like if you cut service into La Mirada south of Whittier, I don't think people are gonna be very happy about that, because people tend to use the line to have a better direction between Whittier and La Mirada. Cutting that segment would be a blow to the people in La Mirada who would have to like spend so much time like traveling, transferring, and so the main issue is that please keep the service to La Mirada so that people can have a better travel between Whittier and La Mirada. And also for line 50, I'm not quite sure about the downtown LA routing, because when you're transferring to Metro from Montebello Bus Lines, you would have to like pay more instead of like pay less, So it would be better if you just keep the line 50 like segment like currently, so that people can have the opportunity to transfer to lines 40 or 90. And for line 70, well, if 60 and 70 are merged together, so for 70, like there's the loop on I don't know what street it was. Sorry, I'm trying to get the map out here, so bear with me, please.
Are you referring to the northern loop or the southern loop for line 70?
The southern loop that goes past the Montebello Metrolink station. I don't think, I think you should keep the loop because people don't have to like walk you know, walk far or something, so that people could who live like near the loop route after the Montebello Metrolink station should have a bus line, because like I read the report, isn't the line like popular on Wilcox when people like go shopping or go see doctor's appointment or something like that? And so I guess I'll pause for the two lines as of right now, but I'm about to.
Okay, Bill, I think you're getting cut out a little bit at the very end there, but I believe we caught most of your comments. So please go ahead, James.
Yeah, thank you so much for reviewing all of the different proposals, and we appreciate your very detailed feedback. For line 50, we hear you on the change as it would impact La Mirada as well as the downtown shortening, and we've heard very similar comments about downtown, just the forced transfer that would require. As for the loop on line 70, you're talking about two different streets, Montebello Boulevard, which is a couple blocks away from Greenwood. So that's where we would be getting out of some of the neighborhood streets. And it's a short walk away. And then on Maple Ave, which is the western part of that terminal loop, that backs up to some industrial. So the ridership there is a little bit lower as well. So I do definitely hear your concern about the shortening of that route to the Metrolink station, because now that requires people to take line 55 to get there, or take line 20 to get to 70. So that's something we can take a closer look at. We do understand that the southern portion of Montebello Rancho San Antonio neighborhood is one that has high transit usage. So we'll take a closer look at that as we evaluate the connections in the area of Greenwood and Washington. So thank you again for all your comments. We appreciate it.
Great. Yes, thank you, Bill. I appreciate that. So we do have several comments in the Q&A, so let me go through those. Once you factor in the bus fare is so cheap compared to the cost of driving gas, vehicle maintenance and computer. Oh, I'm sorry, it's part of a second part. Looks like they came in two different sections. So let me back up. Riding the 90 is only slightly slower than driving from Montebello to downtown LA, even with all the stops along Beverly Boulevard. I've done both and they end up almost even when you consider in a car you have to park and walk some distance to your office while the bus leaves you very near to where you work. And then that's the part where once you factor in the bus fare is so cheap compared to the cost of driving. So I know we talked about the 90. Did you want to add anything else here, James?
No, I don't have anything to add to that comment, but thank you.
Yes, thank you. Okay, so separate to this project, are there any plans in the works to improve ridership experience, like bus stop improvements, bus lanes, or increased frequency?
Yeah, I'd like to respond to that. That's a great question. We often talk about the rider experience, not just being the time on the bus, but the time you research and get information on new schedules or just a new line that you're taking, a new commute pattern. Bus stops, the time spent at the bus stop waiting, that needs to be a good one in order for people to come back and use the service, and the time on board the bus as well. So all that, as well as transferring to other lines that's makes up the whole ridership experience. And we are looking at what are the different opportunities. Because MBL goes so far beyond the city boundaries, it does make it difficult to have good bus stops throughout, but the city can focus on the bus stops within the city and do more to make those comfortable. Information, there are currently different apps that people can use to get real-time information on the service. So there will also be recommendations to do more of that and get the word out for some of those different apps that a lot of people like to use, particularly younger riders. The fares is another one that a lot of people are happy with, but we'll be taking a look at that. Are there other fare products or passive programs that can help attract more people, make it easier for people to use transit so that cost really isn't a barrier? And then frequency. When we've been going out to the public, we've been asking for feedback on these proposed route changes. We haven't been talking too much about schedules like frequencies, late night service today during our call, but when we've been talking to people, as well as the online survey, we ask a question about, once MBL grows, and it should grow, how should they invest in more service? Should it be earlier service, later service, more frequent service during peak periods, more frequent service during the midday, more weekend service so that all routes run 7 days a week? Should it be better bus stops? So those are all different service investments that go above the current level of service that's scheduled and that's provided day to day. And those are things that we all think are important, and we'd love to get your feedback on that. So as you all take the survey and share that with others, we ask that you answer all the questions, because one of them has to do with those investments that would lead to an overall better rider experience.
Great, thank you, James. We have 2 more comments here. I appreciate everybody's time. I know we're a little bit past, but we are having such good input, so we'll want to address these few more comments. So bear with us. And the next one is from Juan Munoz. Can line 70 serve inside the Monterey Park Marketplace along Marketplace Drive to better serve the Costco? And can you work with the city of Monterey Park to add extra sidewalk place?
I won't say yes or no, but it's something that we can look at. I do know that the travel lanes along Marketplace Drive are very narrow. Some of the turns that are in the Costco area would be a challenge for transit vehicles. We've explored that area firsthand. It has many destinations, but it could be challenge operationally. So it's something we can look into more closely. Today, the route loops around the cemetery, so we're not picking anybody up in that direct vicinity, but there are apartments and other multifamily housing that's just to the north of the shopping center, where people are utilizing the service. So we need to just balance those different needs, the commercial destinations, people going to work and shopping, and then also some of the people who live just north of the shopping center. But we'll take a closer look at that.
Thank you, James. And another comment here. Earlier in the meeting, someone said that from the staff team said in an answer that service hours cannot come back until ridership comes back. Can you expand on what the holdup is there from a funding perspective? City of Montebello financials indicate transit service fund is fares plus federal. I'm assuming mostly capital and grants plus LA Metro local return funds. Presumably, the operating hours will come from LA Metro's local return funds. So what does the future of that look like, and how will it support the growth of frequency and these network changes?
That's a great question, and I guess allow me to first clarify that the proposed changes that we've been sharing today are focused on just keeping things even as far as the number of hours, the number of buses. We are going to be looking at service expansion options and prioritizing those based on community feedback, based on what ridership has been demonstrating. And that is something that will be included in this plan. It's not completely a cost neutral plan, but the immediate changes or immediate recommendations are focused on just reorganizing or restructuring the system. That said, we will look at ways to grow over time. And those are conversations that we haven't had in a lot of detail with MBL staff, but we will be having after this round of community outreach, and we get a better sense of just what people would like to see in moving forward and growing the system.
Great, thank you so much. Okay, and then can you put bus numbers at the bus stops? Commerce provides free transportation and their bus stops have names.
That's a good point, and somebody else mentioned earlier about the bus stop experience, and information at bus stop is key, that people know who are first-time users or just taking different trips, what the service is, when it's going to be there. So that is something that'll be included as a recommendation for this study.
Great, thank you. And then the last comment, I'll just read it out. It is very hard to make a connection to a bus going to downtown from LA Trade. So we will definitely take note of that. And with that, I don't see any other hands raised or comments in the chat. So I think we can go ahead and wrap it up. And I'll hand it over to you, James, to close out our meeting with the next steps.
All right, so next steps. The first one is that we want to remind you, if you haven't already taken the survey, to please do so. It's at mblmoves.com. It's the project website. And we ask you to also share that with any other members of your community. And that survey will be open until April 1st. So we'd love to get some feedback by then, some additional feedback. We appreciate all the great questions and comments that we received today. So thank you all for your time. Thank you for reviewing the changes and for spending time with us this evening. Our next steps will be to take all the feedback that we've received through our different community meetings, both in person, this virtual one today, our survey discussions that we've had with bus operators, and we'll continue to have with stakeholders. We're going to take all that feedback and we're going to make some revisions to our proposed changes. Nothing that we shared today or that you're seeing on our project website is set in stone. This is merely the first set of concepts. So we're going to take all of your feedback and make some adjustments before we get to recommendations. We're going to collaborate with staff to make sure that the plan that we create reflects the goals, aspirations of the community, existing riders, potential riders, the community at large. So again, thank you all for your time this evening. We look forward to hearing from you in the future. We're going to be reporting back over the next couple of months as we start to finalize the plan. So please continue to check out our project website, check the city's social media sites, and there will be continued information about this project. Thanks again.